to A Well-Designed Business. My name is Luann Nigara, and I'm so glad you found this podcast. Together with my husband Vince and our partner Bill, we have grown our company Window Works from the ground up. So I know and I understand the challenges you face in running your interior design business. I also know that your talent alone isn't enough to ensure your success. So on this podcast, we talk about strategies and practical steps to help you grow your business. But make no mistake about it, we have our share of fun here too, mixed in with those aha moments that I love so much. This isn't fluff. Nobody has time for that. Whether you are a new interior designer or a seasoned designer, I am here to help you create and to manage the kind of interior design firm that you dream of. It's straight talk and it's action. Are you ready? Let's get started. Hi, welcome to A Well-Designed Business. Before I get into the show, I want to share with you that next week, September 13th, 2023, My Doma Studio is hosting a webinar at 12 o'clock p.m. Eastern. And the special guests are myself and my daughter, Christy Rocha, who is the host of the podcast Sass Says. And as you know, Christy is also the co-host of Luann Live this year. She is taking the lead at Luann Live in all of the conversations surrounding wellness. And in this webinar with My Doma, we're going to talk about how and why health and wealth are critically tied to each other and share some strategies so that you can work both objectives into your business. So to register for this free event, go to either my Linktree and Instagram, go to my Facebook group, or go to my website, and under the Coaching and Events tab, you will be able to get the free RSVP link, okay? And of course, if you're interested in Luann Live, Health and Wealth, a well-designed business within a well-designed life happening this November in Orlando, 2023, go to luannlive.com. Now, today's show. Over the past 7 years, we've covered many of the important factors of owning an interior design business and operating it in your own town or state, right? And there have been a couple of times when we've talked about having projects outside of the country. A good episode on this topic is 866, where McCall Dolkus talked about her journey about doing design in different countries. Now, for some of us, it might sound crazy, but the more you learn about it, the more you might be thinking, this sounds doable. In fact, one of the speakers that will be at Luann Live this year, Michelle Wiebe from Studio M, recently shared with me in a conversation that she might soon be working on a project overseas. And if you've met Michelle or heard her podcast episode, please, and if you've missed her podcast episode, please check it out. We'll put it in the show notes. But you'll know that a couple of weeks ago also, we had a good half-hour conversation on Instagram, which I'm sure we can figure out how to link that too. I don't know. I say these things. I have no idea if they can happen. But we talked about the design build process and about delivering exceptional client experience. Michelle is exceptionally talented in this area, okay? And she's contemplating a project out of the country. So I'm super excited to have this conversation with Christina today and pick her brain on best practices so that Michelle and others can get some tips, okay? Now, Christina Richardson is a Scandinavian native who grew up on the charming coast of northern Sweden. After moving to the U.S. with her husband and her two daughters, Christina earned her interior design degree from the New York Institute of Art and Design. She first earned her master's degree in mechanical engineering and a bachelor's degree in construction engineering. Okay, this sounds like one smart cookie, right? Now, with 20 years of interior design under her belt from Sweden, Christina has learned a lot about starting your business over in another country. And she's here to share the musts of what she's learned so that if you are considering taking a project in another country, you might be a little bit more prepared. Here's Christina. Hi, Christina. Thanks so much for joining me on A Well-Designed Business today.
Well, thank you. It's an honor to be here. Thank you for having me.
I'm excited for this conversation. It's so funny, Christina. Literally today, as we're recording, this morning, I was on an Instagram Live with Michelle Wiebe from Studio M in Tampa area in Florida. She's going to be a speaker at Luann Live. And she was telling us that she has an opportunity that might be developing for her to do a project overseas. And I said, oh my goodness, I'm interviewing Christina Richardson today, and she's going to tell us all about how to do that.
Right.
So I'm excited because you're actually going to share us 2 points of view. Number one, how to start a design business and how to start to get clients in another country. But then also this technical aspect that you mentioned in your intake form that I really liked, which is, what do you need to know about taxes and the government restrictions and all of that nonsense. So should we start with, I know all that legal
Oh,
nonsense,
all that legal nonsense. Oh,
right?
gosh.
So maybe let's start with, you are Swedish. You lived in Sweden. You were telling me that you were working design as a side hustle in Sweden, and you moved to the U.S. and decided, you know what, I'm going to start a design business here. Am I relaying it correctly how you said it to me?
Absolutely. Yes. Yeah. Actually, I worked in the mining industry full time, and then I had my design business on the side. And yeah,
Wow.
then
So when you say mining, do you mean like the diamond mining industry?
not really. I wish, but it
Oh,
was, no, it was zinc and gold and copper.
oh, I
I
just
wish, I
watched
wish.
Rough Diamonds on Netflix, so I'm totally like, oh, like I know
Oh,
what that is.
no, it wasn't that sexy, It was more, but I did a lot of, I
Mhm.
did a lot of international business there. I was the business director for a big mining company. So I did a lot of international business for them.
Mhm.
So it's not like I woke up one day and had all the knowledge, but
Right.
I brought that knowledge with me into my design business.
Right. I love that. You said to me off air that you've been listening to the show for many years. So you know what that is.
Yes.
That's our Erica Ward transferable skill, right? You bring that international business experience when you move to the US and you want to get started. So talk to us a little bit about that. Coming here to the US and saying, okay, I'm going to be a designer. And what was that experience like for you, trying to figure out and find clients and stake your business? Because any one of us could use it, this what you're going to share, to just go to a new city in our same country that we live in, let alone, I'm sure there are nuances though with doing it in a whole different country. But talk to me about that a little bit, Christina.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I've always been a designer my
Mhm.
entire life. Like I'm born a designer, and I knew it, but I wanted to be an architect, but I couldn't. Sweden, I think they accepted like 60 students a year.
Whoa.
But so I was like, the heck with it. I'm just going to make money. So that's why I turned to the mining industry. But then my husband got a job in the US, and I decided, hey, you know, I can go full time doing what I love. And
Mm.
so I got a degree in design because I had a degree from earlier in construction engineering and mechanical engineering. Quite boring, actually. But, but I was like, I'm going to get a design in interior design, a degree in interior design, and then I'm going to start a business. And it's scary because
Mm.
I didn't know nearly anything about how to run a business in the US, or like just telling people I'm an interior designer and then feel like, am I really?
Yeah.
The confidence thing just when you start, and I felt that when I relocate and um, open up new areas of my business, that you get a little insecure, like, what am I doing here?
Right.
But I was pleasantly surprised because I have my design business in Sweden. And I have to say, America is wonderful when it comes to when it comes to starting businesses. It's so easy. Like
Mm.
the LLC. I mean, give the LLC founder a Nobel Prize or something, because
Right.
it's amazing how easy it is to start an LLC and run an LLC.
And
And
you
I
just
was
literally file for it, right? Like that's it. Like, okay, you're in business. Thanks.
yay, yay, and that too. I was like, am I really in business now? Okay, is someone coming after me after a year? And you never know, right? It's very, you never know. But yeah, I started my business, and I was pretty anxious. I'm not gonna lie,
Hmm.
and I started putting everything out there, like putting it out on Instagram. I was already a YouTuber from Sweden, so I put
Hmm.
everything out on YouTube because it was 10 years ago. So YouTube was bigger back then. And yeah, still to this day, I put things out on YouTube. So go check it out. But
I was looking at your YouTube. You have a lot of content there. It's nice.
I do. Yes.
Yeah.
So I just kept, posting things on YouTube, like my small projects. I didn't have a lot of clients back then. And, yeah, it's a bit like odd when you start out. But then I started getting clients, and I posted their houses and my work on YouTube at that point. And then I started doing Instagram and social media, and we grew. And yeah, so it was pretty easy to start a business in the US, and I was pleasantly surprised, for sure.
So the technical starting of it, but there was the mindset and the, like you said, the getting over and finding the clients and creating the projects that would attract the clients. So
Yeah.
my question in there is when, so is it like typical, like like a lot of the other stories we've heard on the podcast? It was maybe you did your work in your own home, or you met a friend. I mean, like, do you even have friends when you move here, and your husband, like, when you move here? So like, it's not like a lot of us, like, oh, we've got the people we grew up with, or our mother's, neighbor's, kid, or something like that. So was it were you relying on the YouTube and then eventually the Instagram because you guys were, literally transplanted here from Sweden and didn't know anybody?
Exactly. Yeah, we didn't know anyone. We didn't have any friends. And luckily we rented a house from my husband's company, and it was in such a bad shape. And luckily, or unluckily, I don't know, we had carpenter ants in this house, and I was like, hey, let me help you. I can redesign your bathroom for you. Or this, yeah. And I posted everything on YouTube, and it's a gross video when you see all the carpenter ants just, pouring out. But anyways, so yeah, so I started with renovating the house that we rented, and then I actually got a client.
Wow.
He was paying me too, which was awesome.
That's great. It's so funny listening to you talk about those beginning years and how difficult it was, and how I can hear how you're reliving the insecurities, because I know you by reading your website and looking at your YouTube, and my brain is just like, wait, that's the person who wasn't sure of herself? Like, I just can't even wrap my brain around that right now. But that is the thing, and that is the hope part for all the younger, newer designers listening. Like, you have this moment where you're scared to death and nothing feels right, but you plow through, right, Christina? That's what you did, right?
Exactly. And I do think that to be quite honest, like, the successful ones are the ones that can stand the awkwardness for a couple of years.
I can relate to that. That's funny because, I could think about the beginning of the podcast, and that's why, and you think about the beginning, you were like, am I talking to the walls? Is anybody listening? What's going on? And that's why I often call out those dozen listeners. I know there was way more than a half a dozen listeners listening from the beginning, right? You always could see your stats. But the point is, I always remember the ones that made themselves known to me. I can remember Jenny Slingerland, Kylie Ponton, Rachel Moriarty, Mary Fran Broussard. I'm going to leave people out. Marina. I'm going to leave people out. Gail Davis. I know I am, and I don't mean to. But in that first 6 or 7 months, I just remember, like, oh, you're listening. Oh, you're paying attention. And I was like, okay, even if it's just these 8 ladies, I got to do my best job for them, So, like, I love that analogy. If you can get through those first couple of years where you're questioning yourself and it feels awkward and uncomfortable, then the success comes later, right?
Exactly. I'm a firm believer in that.
Yeah, that's really,
Yeah.
really, I've never had anybody say that to me before, but it's so relatable. I love it. So, okay, so now you get here and you are doing the work here. So what happens? So we do so we're talking about like now we have an international audience. We have designers from all over the world listening, and maybe they want to come to the US and start a business. So are we going to talk about the things that you're going to talk about from the legal standpoint, like the taxes and the regulations and stuff? Is that all going to be the contrast from Sweden to the US, or is it relatable if somebody in the US has, like I mentioned at the top of the show, Michelle, an opportunity to do a project overseas? She's not going to start a business overseas, but she's probably going to execute a 10 to 20,000 square foot home overseas too. So where are we at with that, Christina?
Yeah, I do think we can talk about, because I do think a lot of Americans want to expand abroad and the other way around. I don't know much about the other way around because my husband and I, and we got a green card fairly quickly. I don't want to talk about like getting. I don't want to encourage anyone to come to U.S. and work and then risking. That way around it's pretty risky. It's like a whole different can of worms to open up. But the other way around, absolutely.
Okay, good. Okay, and by the way, listen, like people say, I'm not a doctor, but I play one on TV. Like we're not giving legal advice. We're giving, like if you're living like in Europe and you want to come start a business in the US, you're not going to go like, hey, Luann and Christina said, by the way, just like, I don't need to do this disclaimer on that. It's just, get yourself legally as a human in whatever country you're in. And then we're going to talk about the challenges of doing design in that country. How about that?
Yeah. We could touch it, and I can say like, yeah, make sure you have the right visas to work in the U.S. and then we can continue. But it's basically the same.
That's happening.
It's the same. It's the same thing the other way around. Like, I mean, if you work 3 hours away or 12 hours away, it's it's the same.
Right. We had a episode on the podcast, and the name will come to me. You're right. I'm, with 1,000 shows, I don't remember all the names anymore. I was pretty good at remembering them all the time, but I can remember that she talked about how their firm, I think, was in Chicagoland area or Minnesota, and they were doing projects in Denver area and also New York and other areas. And she gave really good tips for, developing boots on the ground teams in the different areas that you want to work in, and how to vet and how to look for those resources. So we'll figure it out. I'll remember before the end of the show and who it was, and we'll put it in the notes. So, okay. So back to you. So we're talking about, we're here in the US and maybe we have an opportunity to do a project in, Spain or Sweden. So what do we need to think about?
I do think, first of all, like make sure you have the right visas to work in the country you're in, or contact a lawyer and see like, what can we do? How can we work? Can we work from the US, and be invoiced or send invoice from the US, et cetera, et cetera. If you're not sure, contact a local lawyer. So that's really important. That's the kind of the first step, I would say.
So let me ask you about that a little bit, because I'm not really very knowledgeable at all of this stuff at all. So if I am I have one client that has a second home in Spain and I'm going to do the work there. Do I need to do, so there's two different ways I can do this work. I can just do the design and then hand off the design, and then the client goes to Spain and hires a boots on the ground crew there. And then in which case, I'm not actually working in Spain, right? I'm actually have contracted for a design. It's an encased product. It's a deliverable, and that happened on U.S. soil. So that's one thing. I don't need a visa for that. But if I want to be the one that flies back and forth to Spain and inspects the site and hires the carpenters and the GCs and the plumbers, then I actually need to consult a lawyer about what and if I need a visa, or I definitely need a visa, is what you're saying.
I would do that. And then you can always, depending on how big the project is, you can kind of decide on your own if you're going to follow his advice or not. And try, I mean, honestly,
but I'm not doing that.
honestly, if you just have like this is your first project. It's a small project. There's so much other things to figure out too, like listen to your lawyer and then try and talk to the contractor and say, hey, can we figure this out for the first time, just to kind of get a feel for what is this like, because it's a lot of money to get a lawyer to just one small project. But if you know that this project is going to turn into more projects and more projects, well, you can kind of try to figure it out as you go, because yeah.
And does it matter how about does this distinction matter? Maybe I am going to do the design. Maybe I am going to be the one to oversee all the things. But what if instead of me hiring the contractors and my company paying the contractors, if the client pays the contractors, now I'm basically a designer and a consultant on the site. So that seems like that might be another way to not be so knee deep legally and all the things in another country, right?
Exactly. That's always how I work anyway.
Oh, okay. Okay. So you have your client in Sweden, they hire the contractor, they pay the contractor, and it doesn't run through your business.
Exactly. And I've also had instances where the contractor hired me. Yeah. So you can play around with that, but in general, I always have the client sign directly with the contractor.
Okay. So that's one way around it. Okay. So first thing is look into a visa. Second thing, consult a lawyer, figure out that. Third thing, figure out how you're going to run the project between yourself, your client, and all of the trades. And then what else do we need to think about in there?
There is one big thing that I think all designers should know. And I feel like there is a lack of knowledge in general, no matter if you do business locally or nationally or internationally, I do feel there's a lack of knowledge around contracts and how important they are, and for global business. And if you're selling furniture, for instance, and you're shipping furniture or you're installing in other countries, there is a law that is signed by, I think it's around 95 countries that they signed it. It's called the Vienna Agreement, and it's the Convention on Contracts for the International Sales of Goods, also known as CISC. And this law, this international commercial law, it actually jumps in and it states how the sales of goods should be judged in case there is no other agreement in place. So, an example: if you have a contract with a client in, let's say, Spain, and something goes completely south, and your contract is, excuse my French, but half-ass. Then this law steps in and tells you, like, this is how we will judge. This is how it's going to be. And so it is very important for everybody to know this law. And the United States signed it. Canada signed it. Most developed countries have signed this law, which is good. So if you know it, I mean, you have a really good base to stand on if you know this law. And it's pretty easy to read too. So I would just encourage everybody to either get a little course in it or Google it, or if you don't want to do any of that, make sure your contracts is in really, really good shape.
So let me understand something. So what you're saying is, if you have a problem with ordering furniture, receiving furniture to another country, and your contract is not solid, then this contract, this Vienna Agreement contract, is going to usurp your contract. And whatever it says, you're going to have to abide by. And is that first of all, the understanding that I'm getting?
Correct.
Okay, so what types of problems are we talking about that this might be invoked? Are we talking about a debate between us and our consumer? They don't want to pay for the furniture because they think, or are we talking about us and the vendor? We ordered from North Carolina and we shipped it to Spain and it's damaged, and North Carolina says, well, the guy on the slow boat to China made it the problem, not me. Is that the type of problem? Like, what kind of problem are we running into that this contract is going to come into play?
Um, let's take an example. You ship a sofa to a client in Spain. Spain. This is Spain is the country of the day, and they get the sofa. They decide to keep it in the garage, but their garage is not air conditioned, so the sofa goes bad.
Okay.
Who is to blame? Like, what is it the client? Is it me? Is it the garage?
Right.
Exactly. So that's one problem. Or the sofa is damaged. The client saw it, but they didn't tell you. They took it in, they used it for 3 months, and then they were like, "Whoa, by the way, it was damaged at delivery."
Okay. Okay.
Um,
So
how?
what you're telling me is literally problems that may not occur when you're doing a project in your town can become big problems because you're not there to inspect the sofa when it comes. You're not there to make sure that the client puts it in the house and not in the garage. You're not there to actually handle the problem at the moment. And as soon as it becomes a debate between you and your client, if your own contract doesn't address these things, then this other law is going to, and what I can imagine is that other law is probably not always going to be in our favor. It's like, you know,
You are totally right. Like, as a seller, you have way more responsibilities than a buyer.
yes,
So
right. That's typical.
yes,
Okay. We like it when we're the buyer, but not when we're the seller. Okay.
exactly.
So what you're saying is that your regular garden variety contract for when you're working in your own home country says, hey, the furniture gets delivered, and if it's not, up to snuff, we'll replace it, we'll repair it. But the ironclad contract is, when I deliver the furniture, then what? Then you have to accept it, and I'm signed out. My responsibility is gone. Like, you're saying that there's an extra layer of information that has to go in there because your team is not going to be the one likely to accept this delivery.
Exactly. And then so CISC also protects you quite a lot from just non-payments. If a client don't want to pay, stuff like that. So it's really important to know, at least to know the basics about CISC and the Vienna Agreement. Also, there is, and you touched it already, is the whole transportation, like that whole can of worms, because who is responsible for the transportation of your furniture during loading, customs, unloading, storage, etc.? And where's the battery limit? Where's the responsibility? Where is that point where the responsibility goes from you to the client, or maybe from you to the contractor?
Right.
And it's important, even when we work, if we're just staying in the U.S., or even if we just work locally, but it's even more important when you when you work abroad. And here we have something called, there are different like preset texts that you can use in your agreements. The ones I use is called Incoterms. So for everybody out there, grab a pen, write down CISG, CISG, the Vienna Agreement, and then Incoterms, because those two things, read it through and you'll understand what you are missing in your contracts at this point.
Yeah. And INCO is INCO, or?
Yes,
Yeah.
Incoterms.
Okay. Okay, so
INCO.
these are two things that we need to look up because, I can see this. Like, look, it's what's so crazy is it seems obvious after you say it, but it's not obvious before we do it. And I'm sure you learned a lot of this the hard way, unfortunately, right?
Absolutely.
Even like simple things like, I mean, we built a house years ago, Vinny and I. And, when you build a house and whether you're the designer, the contractor, the homeowner, you're walking through that house every day and you're finding the things that are wrong, right? Like I remember we walked in and they had put all the tile on the backsplash in the wrong way. Back in 1998, 99, Vinny wanted it on the diagonal because that was the cat's meow then, right? And so I walk in one day and the guy has got like literally 3 pieces of tile left to lay on this like 6-foot run and 7-foot run of backsplash. And I'm like, oh, that's wrong. And he's like, what? And I said, that's supposed to be on the diamond, on the diagonal. And he said, oh, but it looks so good this way. I'm like, nice try. Like, no, the bin man wants it on the diagonal. Right. And so, but I like found it that day. And so to your point, your contract has to be tighter because I can understand, like, if your client isn't walking in the house and the GC or the tile guy does something and you're over here in the States and it's happening in Spain, like, what is that? Like, is it that you actually have to have like, do you actually introduce into the agreement that, like, you can't be there every week? So do you actually introduce into the agreement that at each stage your client has to verify? Like that doesn't seem very professional either, that it's like you go look to see that the guy put the tile in right. And if not, it's not my fault. Like, how does that work?
I usually do FaceTimes and Zooms with my contractors.
Yeah.
Once or twice a week or whenever they have a question. But don't get me wrong, I'm not perfect by any means. I just finished a project and I almost had a panic attack because towards the end of the project, this was a lovely like peach and turquoise bathroom, and it was just a dream to design. And I look forward to taking pictures and all that. And then towards the end of the project, we had a little problems with the tile delivery, and it was out of stock and all that. And we started discussing like, okay, and I said, okay, well, the shower surround tile, so we could maybe swap that out. And my contractor goes silent, and he's like,
Oh.
The shower surround, it's already up. And I'm like, what tile did you put around the shower? and it turned out he put the floor tiles around the shower,
which is why you were out of floor tiles, by the way.
24 by 48s on the shower walls. And I was like, yeah, I mean, the words that I was thinking was just not nice PG-13. Anyways. And I just felt like, oh my gosh, my heart was sinking. And I was like, this is, but we worked it through. But yeah, things like that will happen. And it's just, hang in there. It's awkward. You feel like you're the worst designer in the world some days. And that day was not a good day.
Yeah, well, it does. It puts an onus on having your design build, specification book up to snuff. I mean, it still isn't going to make the guy look to be sure he did it the right way before he did it. But if you're looking at him and going, dude, like there's a book there. Like I sent you the PDF of it. I sent you the digital version of it, right? It doesn't make it any less difficult or awkward, but it does put you in a better position, I guess, even if the position is that you have to stay with the wrong tile on the surround, but you are looking at your client going, at least I did it right. Like, I don't know. Right. But I mean, I'm also thinking about like when you would have tile delivered to a project in another country, it could sit there in a garage or on site for weeks. And then all of a sudden they could say to you, it never got here. Right? I mean, who's there to make sure and receive? So these are the types of things that I can see would be the challenging parts on the project.
Yes. I usually have my contractors go through everything. We check out like weekly what did arrive, and I have a checklist so I can cross it off and say, okay, this arrived, does it look good? So I kind of put that on my contractors at this point.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so that begs the question that something that is probably literally critical is a relationship with a trustworthy contractor that understands you're in it together, and you got to have his back and he's got to have your back, right?
Yeah, that's the hard part, to find
Yes.
a good contractor. But you know what I've been thinking about this contractor thing, and it's almost like an arranged marriage in a way. I mean,
You're a
you,
nut.
I know, but you meet someone, and you're like, okay, he's a contractor, and sometimes you're like, I need a contractor, I'll take anyone. It's just, and you start working together, and the thing is, you need to communicate, you need to get to know each other, and you need maybe down like you're like 3 or 4 projects down the road. That's when the magic starts happening. That's when you start understanding each other, and that's when the love starts sparkling. No, but I mean, it's almost like you just get put there with someone you barely know usually. You just get kind of, you have their credentials, they look good, they have a nice website, but you don't know them. And
Yes.
working together like this is like, you need to know each other really well. So yeah.
So let me ask you a question. If you were in possibly, if you take yourself back to the first time you did project overseas, and say you're in Michelle's position, and I guarantee you she's not going to be doing a small project. It's not going to be like, hey, let's just, refresh your living room and dining room here. It's going to be a build project, because that's what she does. I mean, she probably smartly should not just meet the first contractor and get in bed with them. She should probably spend some time in the country and have conducting interviews, and maybe renting a workspace over there, or doing, finding a coffee shop, and doing a little vetting. Because if you're going to get involved in a simple renovation that's going to go on for 3 to 4 months, okay, like you said, you can get through anything. But if she's going to get involved in a 1 or a 2 year build, that seems a little bit higher stakes, right, Christina?
Yes, she should. Maybe go to a coffee shop, ask them like who's the best contractor, meet up with whomever they say, and then move on. Talk to realtors. They usually know the best contractors. If you go to like a Sotheby realtor, he probably knows the best one.
Okay.
Um, Start networking and ask around, meet a couple of contractors, talk to them. Maybe they already work with a designer. That's great, because then they know how to, and go with your gut feeling.
Right. You have to
Yeah.
never, ignore that. Now, how about when we think about different building codes and stuff? Like, do we rely on the contractor for that, or is there any responsibility that we need to think about in that regard, Christina?
Yeah, I do think we need to think about it a little bit, because basically codes are the same in all developed countries. Like people are the same size, and most codes are because of, like layouts wise. Like for us as interior designers, we need a certain space between the coffee table and the sofa, and it won't change
Okay.
if you're in Spain or in Sweden.
Right.
But then, but there are a few, like for instance, Sweden, and I think a lot of countries in Europe have more accessible laws that needs to be considered. Like the spaces needs to be accessible in another way for people in a wheelchair, for instance.
Right. And are they also more progressive than us regarding like eco-sustainable type of laws and materials and stuff, or am I imagining that?
Not really, but for instance, like the perennial fabrics that we use a lot here, they're not really you can't really use them in certain parts of Europe because of the chemicals they have. Yeah.
Interesting.
So things like that. But no, I don't think you need to think too much about it. It's more the contractor. I think, and you usually use a local contractor.
But that's interesting. So when I was thinking about it, I was thinking about in the construction phase. So like I was thinking about like how in Europe so often you'll have and we're starting to see it here, the two types of flush on the toilet, right? The little flush and the larger flush, right? And so that just made me think that there are probably other things like that in other parts of the country that are more progressive and have that. But what you brought out was that certain fabrics are not approved there because of, I guess, the chemicals and the off gassing. But what's wild is I could see as an interior designer, I probably wouldn't even consult a code book over the fabrics that I specify. Like that would be the last thing I would think I would have to. I guess the little fabric police aren't coming into your client's home over there, but still, if it's not legally allowed, like how the heck are you supposed to know that stuff?
I honestly don't know.
You mean you just don't
But
know everything, Christina?
I don't know, but yeah, I just think you need to Google and try to figure out as much as possible on your own. But I haven't found it hard to work from a design perspective. And that codes are that different, but from a construction perspective, I mean, I just have to tell you this. I almost had a heart attack when I moved to the US and I saw the electricals inside the walls, and I was like, how the heck? Because in Scandinavia, you need to have all the electrical wiring inside a PEX tube
Oh,
inside the walls. And I just looked at it. I was like, oh my gosh, people are going to get killed. Like if
cancel,
you run a
cancel.
drill, through that, you're going to, but then I realized, oh, they have 220 volts. Like the volt system is way higher.
Okay.
So for instance, if you touch something and you get electrocuted in Sweden, you can die. But here it's just, you just get a nice reset. so things like that is like, yeah.
Okay. So
And
the
also all
voltage
the,
is way higher there. Like, and that's why the wires all bundled and encased because because I've had installers with WindowWorks, I think it's happened maybe 2 times, once inside work and once in outside work, where an installer has drilled in and hit a wire and we've blown out the whole electricity in the house. And we're like, oh, isn't that so much fun?
yeah. And in Sweden, that guy would be probably dead or paralyzed.
Oh
So
gosh. Oh my goodness.
yeah, so more, I would say more on the construction side, but
Mhm.
you need to be aware of that as a designer as well, maybe because you're designing this, so maybe you need to know a little bit about what
Mhm.
goes on behind the walls, at
It
least.
almost
So
strikes me as that I can't know everything, and country to country, it's probably there are the nuances, but it almost strikes me as I could almost literally visualize. I would be saying to somebody on my team, just keep Googling. What do I need to know about paint in Spain? What do I need to know about electrical in Spain? What do I need to know? Like, just see if you find anything. Like, I almost feel like it's like, like I just watching The Lincoln Lawyer the other night on TV, and it's like all these law shows, right? And it's like 60 boxes of discovery. And they're like, well, it's going to be an all nighter. What are we looking for? We don't know. We'll know it when we see it. It's like that's sort of a Google search. I don't really know what I'm looking for, but I should keep looking until I just see something that I go, oh, I didn't know that, right?
exactly. I mean, you can't be the expert, but just ask questions, ask your contractor, contact lawyers, have good accountants.
Yeah.
Either if you have like one that is really good at international business, or if you have one in each location,
Mm.
but just talk to your accountants. they know so much.
And then how about like the cultural differences? I remember we did an episode a couple of years ago with Mina Duque. And her heritage is Moroccan and something else. And it's escaping me what the other part of her is. Mina, if you're listening, sorry, sweetie. But she lived part-time, she had lived in the US with her husband, Fernando, who happens to be the owner of Duke Renders, by the way. And then they moved to Mexico, to Tulum. And her episode centered on the cultural differences of working with the construction teams and the trades in Mexico, because, she's used to, okay, I'll see you at 9. And 9 was like, well, maybe it was 11, maybe it was 2, maybe it was next Tuesday. And, at first it drove her crazy. And she thought it was like, this guy was not good. This trade was not good. And then she just realized, like, that's how it is. And so she couldn't, like, you can't run a business like that, but I guess a lot of people do in Mexico, right? But what she said was, if I recall correctly, it was a combination of having grace for the culture difference, but also establishing those more solid relationships with some of the people in the trades there that really were willing to say, okay, if I say 9, I'll definitely be there by 10 as opposed to 2. You know what I'm saying? So do you have cultural differences that when you work with the teams in Sweden that are apparent, or is it more culturally aligned as far as the work, frame of reference on work and stuff?
I would say, yeah, there are major cultural differences, and I mean, Americans will be surprised to hear this, but Swedes are, or even Swedes, Germans, the entire Northern Europe is like, if you say 9, they're going to be there. They're 8:50, and they're going to be lined up and ready to work, and they're going to do everything with major precision.
Wow.
Like,
wow.
Yeah. So I never
Don't
need
you
to
roll
worry.
in at 9:30 if you say 9, like, be there on time, because they're going to be there on time.
If you're there 9:01, you're late.
Yeah.
Whereas in the US, I feel like sometimes I've had contractors, they're like, yeah, we'll be there Thursday. And you're like, where are you? Yeah, didn't happen today.
Yeah, I know. It's brutal.
So that was for me very hard to accept in the beginning. But when you know why, in a way, like, okay, things happen to them that they need to regroup and change their plans, and you just have to start to understand it, but also put a little pressure on them, of course. So I agree with her. It's a mix of both.
But I can see, though, if you are from the US and you're accustomed that 9 is 9, right? But 9:10 isn't like, oh my God, we're all stomping around and saying what the heck happened, right? And if it's 9 becomes 10, like, it should be a phone call to say, I'm not there at 9 and here's why. But what you're saying is, if you're working in one of the Northern European countries, like, if you want a good working relationship with those trades, then you want to, if you say 9, be there by 9, because you can also make the same phone call. You can also walk in late. You can also be the person, maybe it's you're the head guy on the job, the head man or woman on the job, but you're not going to have the respect of the trades. And then they're not going to be the ones that, like, put your job as a priority. So there is that, like, do as I do in my country type of a thing, right?
Yes. Yeah. And I do think it's important to ask questions. I mean, people do like it when you ask questions about their culture. Like, how do you do this here? How am I supposed to act? How
right.
Am I supposed to be on time, or do you have, like, is it ish? Like, they're gonna answer you, and you're gonna. I just I had when I worked for the mining industry, I had a client in China, and we were meeting up, and he was so nervous about going to Sweden, so he studied everything about Swedish culture, and I never did any business with any Chinese, so I studied Chinese culture. And when we met, he tried to kind of be Swedish and I tried to be Chinese, and it was very awkward when we just, shaking hands, and it was just like, how. And then that's not a good situation at all. I think it's better to just, be polite, listen, laugh a little bit. It's
That's like a Saturday Night Live skit. I'm sorry. That's like funny. He's doing all the things Swedish way. You're doing it all Chinese. You're hitting each other in the face.
Exactly. He gave me, a business card, and I held it with both hands, and I looked at it, and he looked at me like, "Are you crazy? Are you half Chinese, or what are you doing? Like, you're supposed to put it in your back pocket." Like,
oh, that's so funny. That's awesome. Oh my goodness. Well, this has been extremely informative and a ton of fun. So, Christina, I appreciate your time today. I appreciate that you're a listener of the podcast as well. I think it's pretty cool that you've been listening for all these years. And I just love it so timely that I think, I'm going to make sure that I message Michelle Wiebe and let her know that, this podcast is out. And it's not like, to your point, we couldn't do concrete like this, do this, because, you're not a lawyer and you're not, we don't know what country and not that, but it is just the things, the red flags, the things, the top level things to think about and to, like we said, just Google and look into. Don't just assume things are going to be the same, because they're definitely not going to be the same. And of course, the big tip is the contract. Make sure that your contract is way more robust, it seems like, than the contract you're going to do. It was funny because we didn't say it. I didn't pick up on it when you were talking about it, but even you mentioned about getting paid, right? Like, do I want to chase somebody that lives in Spain for money? No, I really don't. Like, you got to have that locked down. It's one thing to chase somebody that for money in your own city, you know what I mean? But not across countries.
yeah.
No. You're probably never going to see that.
No.
Yeah. So
No, I take more up front.
Yeah. I agree. Here it is. 100% deposit on everything. That's it.
That's how we do it in America.
That's it. That's how Amazon does it. Why not? I mean, what the heck? What do you buy now that you don't pay for in full before you get it, for crying out loud? You can't even buy a sandwich at the deli you don't pay for in full before you get the darn thing.
Exactly. 100%.
Anyway, well, thank you, Christina, for joining me today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been a pleasure.
How about that, right? Literally starting from scratch, trying to get new clients in a new country that she's not from. I mean, that's pretty daunting, right? But she did it. And how did she do it? She does it the way anyone starts their business. You figure out what marketing feels right to you, what you can afford, what you can lean into, and go for it. Now, Christina said she experienced fear and imposter syndrome, but she powered through. She decided on YouTube videos and she did them, and they paid off. So I love that she did this, okay? Now, contracts. She talked about the importance of contracts. You need one. If you don't have one, you have to get one, and do it with your own lawyer. Okay, that's me talking to you, okay? Now, she shared that there are some things that you need to have information on and agreements that you need to understand, especially when you're working outside of the country. She talked about that Vienna Agreement, okay, for shipping or installing furniture in another country. Look, am I a lawyer? Is Christina a lawyer? Right? So what she's saying is, at minimum, know about it, understand the basics of it, have a conversation with your own lawyer about it, right? It seems like this Vienna Agreement dictates how the sale of goods will be judged in cases when there aren't other agreements in place. So there's some nuance in there, but that's just it. This is the tip to go find out. This isn't the end all on the information, okay? Because think about it. All the crazy things that happen on your projects. That's when you're in the same town, you can go check on them. How about when it's going to be delivered miles, oceans, time zones away? You're not there to check on it. You don't know if your client is checking on it. It's insanity, right? So look into all of this. Now, next thing she talked about was contractors, how to figure out how to work with in another country. I love that she compared it to an arranged marriage, right? She said it's hard to know off the bat if you're a good fit. It's usually 3 or 4 projects down the road when the magic starts to happen if you've got, a copacetic thing going on with a contractor, right? So the thing is, she said, if you're going to do a 1 or 2 year build, you want to vet a contractor, okay? Because to just pop into the first, one you meet. And her advice is to travel there first to vet the contractors, to talk to different people. She said, ask the barista at the coffee shop, talk to realtors, figure out who's in that network there and actually look into it, okay? And then when you have a couple of options, she suggested meeting with them and getting to know them a little bit, okay? And I'm going to just add, don't ignore your inside voice. If everyone is recommending someone, but you're sitting there and you're not feeling it, you don't feel like the two of you are hitting it off, because think about that. That relationship has got to now cross time zones and oceans probably. So you really need to have some sort of understanding with each other. All right. Something that you probably caught on to that Christina kept advising was ask questions, right? There's always a learning curve. Everything we do, trial and error, but stakes are a little higher, I think, in this situation, right? She said to communicate with the contractor, have contact with your lawyers, good accountants. All these things have to be buttoned up, right? Of course, as she mentioned, there will be cultural differences. So ask people about their culture, get to know the customs in the country you're in. Google is a good friend, Christina said, because, the design business might be one way in your country and a different way in someone else's country. We had an episode a few months back with Cleo, and she was from France, and she was saying how the business model is very different in France. So you're using the same language, you're saying into your design, you're saying this, you're saying that, but somebody else is picturing a different deliverable or a different process because that's how it is in that country. So these are important things to think about. All right. Thank you again, Christina, for helping us consider what we don't know about having a project out of the country. I love it. It sounds like to me we have a lot of good information to get us started in asking good questions. That's how I feel this is. So if you are at the point where you might be taking a project out of the country, this was a great, what do I not know? I don't know, right? Okay, and before I go, I want to say, if you are local in the New York, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, Connecticut area, I hope you are planning to join me at the Home Depot Design Center in Vauxhall, New Jersey. This is next week, September 14th, 2023. We are going to visit the new Home Depot Design Center. We are going to see all the fantastic luxury appliances they have there, and we're going to learn about their trade program. And I'm pretty sure I'm going to do some little conversation about business so we get our brains going. The beginning, I was going to say the beginning of the year, because doesn't the fall feel like the beginning of the year? I don't know. It's a thing, right? So this event is free, but you do have to RSVP because they are giving us food. They're giving us a beautiful lunch, and they want to make sure that they have enough on hand for everyone. So the link will be in the show notes. It will also be in my Instagram link tree. I'm pretty sure it's on my website, and it should also be in my Facebook group. All right. So thank you so much for joining me today. I hope that you have a great day. Decide to be excellent. Thank you for joining me today. This podcast is a production of Luann Nigara, Inc. If you want to know more about me, my books, or Luann University, go to luannnigara.com. And if you are interested in having WindowWorks help you with your next window treatment or awning project in the New York, New Jersey metro area, go to windowworksnj.com to learn more. Have an excellent day.